Let's cover all the most important aspects of the Blender interface for learning 3D animation. Understanding these will be crucial for learning Blender and making 3D animations going forward. So let's jump into it. First, let's talk about panels. The Blender interface consists of a series of panels. You could scale any of these panels at any point by clicking and dragging the boundary of a panel with the left mouse button, like so. You can create more panels by right-clicking the edge or boundary of a panel and pressing either vertical split or horizontal split. Vertical split will split your panels vertically, like so, and if we right-click on this again and do a horizontal split, and then press left mouse, you will see that it will create horizontal panels like so. Of course, we kind of just made a mess, so how do we fix this? Well, all you have to do is right-click on this panel here, and click Join Areas. Then, as your mouse is hovering over this panel, you can left-click it to delete it. I'll right-click on this boundary and press Join Areas and left-click on this 3D viewport to delete it as well. To change what's in a panel, all you need to do is left-click this little drop-down menu that's at the top left of every panel. So you can see it here, you can see it here, and you can see it here, as well as here on the timeline. For example, I can click on my 3D viewport and change it to the UV editor here, and now we can see that our 3D viewport is now the UV editor. I'll left click this dropdown and click the 3D viewport once again. And if you ever want to full screen a panel in Blender, all you need to do is press Ctrl plus space on your keyboard, which will full screen that panel. Now you can see that our 3D viewport is now full screen. To edit this preview, you can press Ctrl plus space again, or you can press this little back to previous button at the top left of your UI. And this applies to every panel in Blender. So if I mouse over my outliner here and press Ctrl plus space, you'll see that the outliner is now full screen. And we can return to previous by pressing Ctrl plus space again. Blender also has a series of default workspaces for various 3D workflows at the top of our screen here, as you can see. For our purposes here, we're going to mainly be sticking to the layout, animation, and shading workspaces. So I'll go back to the layout workspace here, which is the default. And just so you know, if you ever mess up your Blender UI just beyond repair, it's a total mess and you don't know how to fix it, all you need to do is press this little plus icon, then go to General, Layout. That will reset your Blender interface back to the default. There are two quick menus in our 3D viewport as well. By pressing T, we can show and hide the Quick Tools menu. This is where our selection mode, 3D cursor, translation, rotation, and scale options live, plus a few more. You can also press Shift plus space to access this menu at your cursor at any time, which is helpful. So I'll press Shift plus space and go back to the selection box tool. You can also press N or click the little arrow at the top right of the 3D viewport here to access additional quick settings. These are related to the transform data of your selected object, the tool settings of your current tool, and the view settings of your viewport camera. And as you can see, you can show and hide it by pressing N. Now let's quickly cover something that's very important to understanding Blender, which is the 3D cursor. This little red and white circle you see here acts as a spawning point for new objects in your 3D scene, a reference point for pivoting, and more. To place it around your scene, all you need to do is hold Shift and right-click, like so. And to reset your 3D cursor, all you need to do is press and hold Shift plus S, then click Cursor to World Origin. That will reset your 3D cursor back to the default location. You can also adjust the 3D cursor's location and rotation values in the right-hand menu here of the 3D viewport by clicking the View tab, then going to 3D cursor, and holding left-click on any of these values. I'm going to press left click and reset this back to 0. I'm going to hide this menu by pressing N. Now let's talk about something that may be overwhelming at first, but is actually very simple, the properties editor. And I'm definitely not re-recording this section because my webcam was covering this part of the UI. This panel is at the bottom right of your layout by default, as you can see here. This editor contains several important tabs that are represented by different icons that change how your scene is displayed, the properties of your selected object, the settings of your current tool, and more. and hovering over any of the property editor tabs shows you what it's named. For our purposes here, we're really only going to cover the most important tabs for 3D animation because luckily, as animators, we really only care about a select few of these tabs. The first tab here is the Active Tool and Workspace settings, which lets us change the settings of our currently selected tool in the 3D viewport. For example, if I click on the cursor tool here, we now have a new set of options available to us. If I click on the transform tool, we have a new set of options, etc., etc. I'm going to press Shift plus space and then go back to the select box tool. The next set of tabs, which are separated from our current tab by a very small gap, are our scene-specific properties. The first one is this camera icon, which is the Renders Properties tab. This is where you change render engines, sampling settings, and engine-specific properties and other options that change how your final image is rendered from your 3D scene. The next icon looks like a printer, and that is because it is our Output tab. This is where you can change resolution, frame rate, and where the files you're rendering are being output on your computer. The next tab we care about is the one with a globe icon, because that is our World Properties tab. This is where you can change the properties of the sky or background of your scene in 3D. If we go to the top right of our viewport here and change the material preview mode to rendered, we can actually preview what this does. So I'm going to left click on this color property right here, which will give us access to a color wheel, which I'll make a little bit brighter. And as you can see, the background of our scene is changing. If we hold left click in any of these parts of the color wheel, we can change the color of our world. You can also change the strength here, like so. I'm going to go back to the solid preview mode by clicking on this second little icon at the top right of our viewport. And you'll notice that once again, there's a small section between our tabs here, and that's because the remainder of our tabs are object specific, meaning that they change depending on what object you currently have selected. I'm going to make sure I have the cube selected and go to this orange tab here, which is the Object Properties tab. Here, you can change object properties like scale, rotation, and location, as well as object visibility properties. So if I hold left click on this, you'll see that we can change the location of our cube, the rotation of our cube, as well as the scale of our cube. And to reset any of these values to default, I will just mouse over them and press backspace. So if you want to reset a value to default in Blender, just mouse over it and press backspace like so. If we go to visibility here, there's a really useful one I like at the bottom called holdout. And if we click on that, absolutely nothing happens, seemingly. But that's just because we are in the solid mode for viewport shading. If we go to the rendered view, you can see that holdout makes our cube look gray. What this actually does though, is it makes the object you have selected render as transparent pixels in your final render, which is awesome and really, really useful for compositing. We'll touch on that in a later video though. So I'm going to toggle this off and go back to our solid preview. The next tab has this blue wrench icon, which is called the Modifiers tab. This is where predefined modifiers that manipulate the objects in your scene live. All you need to do is click Add Modifier here, and for example, I will do a Subdivision Surface modifier, and I'll click Add Modifier again and do a Solidify modifier. What makes modifiers in Blender so powerful is that they're completely non-destructive, which basically just means that you can always turn them off or delete them and have your object go back to its original state. You can toggle previewing of these modifiers in your 3D viewport by clicking this little monitor icon, and you can drag around the order of your modifiers by holding left click on this section right here and moving them around like so. I'm going to get rid of both of these modifiers by pressing this little X icon. The next tab we care about is the one that looks like a blue bike chain right here. This is the Object Constraint Properties tab. This is used to control object properties like its location, rotation, and scale using its own values or the values of another object, which is referred to as the target object. So if we click on Add Object Constraint and see these constraints that are labeled copy, that's what they're doing. They're copying the values of another object. This is occasionally used for camera animation and for other object animation purposes. This green... The next tab is also really important. It kind of looks like a flux capacitor, and it's called the Object Data Properties tab. This is where you change object mesh data, shape keys, vertex group, aka weights, UV maps, as well as geometry specific settings. Your object's mesh data is exactly what it sounds like. It's the 3D object data that makes up your mesh. For example, the object data of a cube is different than the object data of a sphere. And you don't have to follow along with this, but I will spawn in a sphere. I'll move it to the right. And if I left click on my cube again and go to the object data tab here, you can see that we can actually click on sphere and our cube now looks like a sphere. I will undo that, left click on our sphere and delete it by pressing the delete button, and left click on our cube once more. Next up, we have shape keys, which are used to deform objects into new shapes for animation. They're also referred to as blend shapes or morph targets. You can make a new shape key by pressing the plus button next to this shape key section. And I'm actually going to create 2 new shape keys here because the first shape key essentially will act as my basis that all other shape keys will refer back to. So let's press the plus button here and change the value from 0 to 1 by holding left click right here. You don't have to follow along with this, but I'm going to go to edit mode by pressing tab, left click on a vertice, press G to move it, press left click to confirm that move, then go back into object mode by pressing tab. Now something interesting will happen. If I change the value of this from 0 to 1, you can see that the change we just made to the model is an animatable property. This right here is typically how character rigs are animated in Blender. A modeler will take the face of a character model and they'll make a series of shape keys for different mouth shapes, eye shapes, eyebrow positions, and tie those shape keys into a character rig using drivers. We'll talk about those in a future video though. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have our material tab, which looks like this checkered red sphere we have here. Again, we're not going to see these changes update unless we go back to the rendered view. This is where you control many object settings related to how your object is shaded during a render. This is where you can change object color, roughness, glossiness, transparency, and more. So if I left click on the base color here, you will see that our cube can be any color we want. And if I scroll down here, you'll see even more options we have. For example, if I set metallic to 1, our cube becomes metallic, but I'll reset the color back to gray. The last panel I want to quickly cover in this video is the outliner, which is the one that's been staring us in the face at the top right of our screen this whole time. This is where all objects in our scene are located. You can specify which objects are visible here by clicking this little icon next to them, and you can create new collections here. You can think of a collection as a folder, which you can use to organize objects in your 3D scene with. I'll click this new collection icon to create a new folder like this, and I'll rename it by double-clicking on it and calling it tutorial. If you want to change the color of a collection, you can just right-click on it. For example, I'll do pink for this collection. I'll right-click on this collection, make this blue. And you can hide the contents of a collection by left-clicking this little arrow icon. And you can put new objects in the collection by holding left-click and clicking and dragging them over a collection and releasing. Now, if I hide this, you can see that our tutorial collection is now in this collection. To drag it out, all you have to do is hold left click and drag it over the main scene collection right here. That about covers it though. In the next video, we're going to cover transforms, which is how all animation in Blender is accomplished. So I'll see you there. Congratulations on finishing this tutorial. It might feel like a small step, but you're now one step closer to animation mastery.